In the heart of New York, a quiet janitor's defiant act unearths a hidden legacy of power and betrayal, igniting a revolution that will shatter the system. Are you ready to uncover the shocking truth that changes everything? A crisp autumn morning in New York City carried an almost palpable sense of possibility, yet beneath the radiant shimmer of skyscrapers and the ceaseless hum of traffic, an undercurrent of silent struggle pulsed through the streets. Aaliyah Ali Washington stepped out of her modest apartment, her navy blue uniform a quiet emblem of duty and resilience. Each step on the weathered pavement was a testament to a life marked by everyday battles, battles that often went unseen by those who hurried past in polished shoes and tailored suits. As she made her way toward the community outreach center where she worked, a thousand fragments of memories whispered in her mind, moments of injustice, stinging dismissals, and the relentless weight of a society that had learned to ignore the quiet desperation of the marginalized. Allie's life had never been one of glamour or grand recognition. She had long mastered the art of blending into the background, a shadow among the towering giants of the city. Yet beneath that unassuming exterior lay a fierce spirit that refused to yield. In the heart of New York, where lights never dimmed and dreams often collided with harsh reality, Allie was a paradox, a beacon of hope in a world determined to overlook the voices of those who mattered least. As she navigated the bustling streets near Times Square, the brilliant chaos around her served as both inspiration and a stark reminder of the inequities woven into the very fabric of the metropolis. That morning, the city seemed to hold its breath, as if aware that something momentous was about to unfold. Ali's thoughts drifted to the countless times she had witnessed injustice up close, the furtive glances of disdain from passers-by, the whispered rumors that painted her and others like her as insignificant, the systemic bias that relegated dreams to the realm of impossibility. Her work at the nonprofit was driven by a deep-seated desire to empower those who had been left in the shadows, people whose stories were silenced by prejudice and neglect. But today, the air felt different. An unusual energy stirred, hinting at revelations yet to come and a destiny that would shatter the monotony of her existence. As Allie rounded a corner near a busy intersection, the shrill sound of raised voices cut through the morning calm. A small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk, clustered around a young woman whose defiant eyes met the cold glare of uniformed police officers. The tension was electric, charged with an urgency that made the hairs on Allie's neck stand on end. The officers' voices were harsh and commanding, their language laced with a disdain that resonated with every witness. The young woman, barely out of her teens and exuding a quiet strength, was being cornered and berated by those who wielded power without accountability. In that heart-stopping moment, time seemed to slow for Allie. Her heart pounded as memories of her own experiences, a lifetime of silent endurance, flooded her mind. The pain of being disregarded, the sting of words that reduced her to nothing more than an afterthought, surged to the forefront. Yet, even as a familiar anger rose within her, there was something else at play, a stirring of a long dormant legacy that whispered of power and untold stories hidden deep within her blood. With a resolve as sudden as it was fierce, Allie stepped forward, her voice, steady and imbued with an authority that belied her gentle appearance, rang out over the clamor. "Stop! Is this really how you treat a human being?" The words sliced through the tension, drawing startled glances from both the officers and the onlookers. The young woman, whose eyes shone with a mixture of gratitude and incredulity, seemed to draw strength from Allie's unexpected intervention. For a brief suspended moment, the crowd held its collective breath. In that instant, the ordinary had been transformed into the extraordinary. A single act of defiance had ignited a spark of hope that illuminated the darkness of systemic injustice. Even as the officers barked orders and attempted to regain control, Allie's mind raced with a surge of conflicting emotions. She remembered the countless days when she had kept her head bowed, allowing the world to pass her by, and wondered how many more moments of quiet humiliation lay ahead. But today was different. Today was the day she decided that silence was no longer an option. There was an undeniable truth coursing through her veins, an inheritance of resilience and strength that had been cultivated through years of struggle. It was a truth connected to a name whispered in her family's lore: Commander Marcus Washington, a man whose legacy had been cloaked in mystery and valor. In the aftermath of her bold interruption, the confrontation grew more chaotic. The officers, their authority challenged, shifted their focus between Allie and the young woman, their faces contorting with both anger and a dawning uncertainty. The crowd, now swelling with murmurs of support and indignation, began to demand accountability from those who had long wielded power without consequence. In that charged moment, Ali felt an unexpected clarity. The injustice unfolding before her was not merely an isolated incident. It was a symptom of a deeply entrenched system, one that demanded to be challenged by every voice it had long silenced. As the confrontation subsided and the officers retreated with a mix of reluctant compliance and simmering resentment, Ali remained at the epicenter of the gathering. The onlookers, their expressions shifting from shock to admiration, began to speak in hushed tones about the courage it took to stand up against such blatant abuse of power. In their eyes, she was no longer just another face in the crowd. She had become a symbol of resistance, a living testament to the power of one individual to alter the course of fate. And yet, as the initial fervor began to settle into a collective contemplation, Allie's thoughts returned to the quiet corners of her own life where secrets of the past lingered like shadows waiting to be revealed. Walking away from the scene, Allie's steps were measured yet purposeful. The echo of the day's events reverberated in her mind as she retraced her route to the outreach center, a place that now seemed transformed by the weight of her defiant act. Every familiar landmark, the weathered brick facades, the distant hum of subway trains, the soft glow of neon signs, took on new significance as if imbued with the promise of change. In her quiet moments of reflection, she could not shake the feeling that this confrontation was merely the opening act of a much larger saga, one that intertwined her personal struggles with the fate of an entire community. Later that day, alone in the stillness of her modest apartment, Allie allowed herself a moment of introspection that was both raw and unfiltered. Seated by the window with the distant skyline as her only companion, she revisited the events of the morning in her mind. The vivid recollection of the young woman's defiant stare, the searing sound of the officer's rebukes, and the overwhelming surge of emotion had etched themselves into her memory. And amidst it all, the silent promise of a hidden legacy, the unspoken truth about her father, Commander Marcus Washington, hovered like a distant yet ever-present beacon. Although his name had always been spoken with a mix of reverence and guarded secrecy within her family, it now pulsed in her veins with renewed urgency, as if urging her to embrace a destiny that was larger than the confines of her everyday existence. As dusk settled over the city and the first stars began to punctuate the twilight, Ali found herself torn between the comfort of solitude and the burgeoning realization that she was meant for something greater. The injustice that she had witnessed that morning was not confined to the narrow streets of her neighborhood. It was a universal cry for justice, a rallying call for every soul that had ever been dismissed or degraded. In that moment, a fierce determination took root within her. No longer would she allow herself to be reduced to the margins of society. No longer would she hide behind the veil of anonymity that had kept her struggles private. The spark of rebellion had been kindled, and it was a flame that promised to grow into an inferno of transformative change. In the days that followed, the ripple effects of that fateful encounter began to manifest in unexpected ways. Word of Ali's intervention spread through social media like wildfire, igniting conversations and debates that cut across the spectrum of the city's diverse populace. Strangers reached out to share their own stories of injustice, each narrative a thread woven into the larger tapestry of a community yearning for recognition and fairness. For Ali, every message was a reminder that her actions had transcended the boundaries of a single moment. They had become the catalyst for a movement that was as much about reclaiming dignity as it was about challenging the status quo. Yet beneath the public accolades and the newfound visibility, Ali felt the weight of an internal struggle that was as profound as it was personal. The legacy of her father, a name that had long been shrouded in enigmatic silence, now loomed large in her thoughts. She recalled the faded photographs, the cryptic letters, and the murmured recollections of relatives who had once known him, a man whose life had been defined by valor, sacrifice, and an unwavering commitment to justice. It was a legacy that had been carefully guarded, passed down through generations as both a burden and a blessing. And now, in the wake of her courageous act, that legacy beckoned her forward with a promise of empowerment and a challenge to redefine what it meant to fight for one's place in a world that had long been indifferent to the plight of the oppressed. As night deepened and the city settled into an uneasy slumber, Ali sat alone with her thoughts. The tumult of the day played out in a quiet dialogue within her, a conversation between the scars of past indignities and the bright possibility of a future forged in the crucible of resistance. Every heartbeat echoed with the memory of the morning's confrontation, a reminder that injustice was a living, breathing adversary that thrived on silence and submission. But within that echo was also the promise of transformation, a call to arms for every soul that had ever been made to feel invisible, a summons to rise from the shadows and reclaim a long-forgotten dignity. In the solitude of those hours, Ali made a silent vow to herself. She would no longer be the passive witness to the world's cruelties. She would be the voice that shattered the silence, the force that challenged the entrenched hierarchies of power. Her journey was only beginning, a journey that would take her deep into the heart of injustice and force her to confront the darkest corners of society. Yet it was also a journey illuminated by the light of hope, powered by the belief that every act of defiance, no matter how small, carried within it the seed of monumental change. That night, as the city's neon glow softened into the quiet murmur of dreams, Allie found herself suspended between two worlds, the stark reality of a life defined by struggle and the shimmering promise of a destiny yet to be written. The face of the young woman she had helped that morning remained etched in her memory, a symbol of the countless lives waiting to be seen, heard, and valued. And alongside that image, the name of her father, Commander Marcus Washington, whispered promises of hidden strength and untold heroism, urging her to unlock the power that lay dormant within her. In the silent communion of that midnight hour, Ali understood that her life was no longer her own. It was part of a larger narrative, a story of resistance, of resilience, and of the transformative power of one voice rising against a tide of indifference. As the first hints of dawn crept over the horizon, casting long shadows on the city streets, Ali rose with a renewed sense of purpose. She stepped out into the burgeoning light, her heart brimming with both the scars of a painful past and the fierce hope of a future defined by justice. In that moment, every hardship she had endured, every silent tear shed in darkness, coalesced into an unbreakable resolve. The unseen struggle had become a clarion call, a summons to all who had been left in the margins to reclaim their rightful place in the narrative of their own lives. And so, as New York City awakened to a new day, Allie Washington embarked on a path that promised to redefine not only her destiny, but that of an entire community. The events of that fateful morning, the shock of injustice, and the stirring of a long-hidden legacy had fused into a singular, irresistible force, a force that would drive her to challenge the very foundations of an oppressive system. With every step she took on the cracked sidewalks, with every whispered hope shared by those who believed in change, the spark of rebellion grew brighter, heralding the dawn of a movement that would leave an indelible mark on the soul of the city. In that dawning light, where hope and defiance danced together in silent unison, Allie's story had only just begun, and the world, whether ready or not, would soon come to bear witness to the extraordinary power of a single, unyielding spirit. In the days that followed the bold act of defiance that had rippled through the streets of New York City, the echoes of injustice reverberated with a disquieting intensity, casting long, dark shadows over the lives of those who had long been neglected. Aaliyah Ali Washington found herself thrust into a maelstrom of public attention and private turmoil as the incident evolved from a single moment of courageous intervention into a symbol of a far more pervasive crisis. The city, once a vibrant mosaic of hope and ambition, now seemed to pulse with a latent anger and sorrow, a testimony to the many lives marred by an ingrained system that had long turned a blind eye to the suffering of its most vulnerable citizens. In neighborhoods that had quietly borne the weight of systemic neglect for decades, stories of injustice began to emerge like fragile sparks in the darkness. People from all walks of life, previously silenced by the oppressive hand of authority, found their voices rising in unison. In dimly lit apartments, over battered kitchen tables, and in the small hours of restless nights, whispered accounts of discriminatory practices and abuses of power were shared with a mix of trepidation and fierce determination. The incidents were many: wrongful detentions, unwarranted confrontations, and the bitter sting of racial profiling that had become all too familiar. For every overlooked complaint and every dismissed grievance, the collective pain grew, knitting itself into a tapestry of despair that was impossible to ignore. Within the corridors of the local police department, discontent simmered beneath a veneer of duty and order. For some officers, the realization dawned slowly that their roles were not immune to the corrosive effects of an unjust system. There were those who, beneath their crisp uniforms and stern expressions, harbored doubts about the orders they were expected to follow. In hushed conversations behind closed doors, a few began to question the very practices that had defined their careers. They spoke of a disconnect, a painful divergence between the ideals they had once embraced and the reality of the rigid, unyielding system that often forced them into moral compromise. This internal conflict, though dangerous and fraught with risk, hinted at the possibility that change might be seeded from within, if only the courage to voice it could be found. Ali, ever the compassionate mediator, sensed these undercurrents of dissent. In her work at the Community Outreach Center, she encountered not only victims of injustice, but also individuals within the system who were caught in an internal battle between duty and conscience. She listened with empathy as a veteran officer, his voice trembling with the weight of years spent enforcing a flawed system, confessed his growing disillusionment. His words, raw and unguarded, spoke of the loneliness of following orders that no longer resonated with his inner sense of justice. Through these interactions, Ali began to realize that the struggle against injustice was not a simple confrontation between the powerful and the powerless. It was a complex, multifaceted conflict that pervaded every level of society. As word of the incident spread, media outlets began to peel back layers of secrecy that had long concealed the true extent of police misconduct. Investigative reports painted a grim picture of a department steeped in tradition yet resistant to reform, a place where the voices of the marginalized were systematically drowned out by bureaucratic indifference. Public opinion, once apathetic, now churned with anger and sorrow. Editorials decried the prevalence of racial profiling and called for sweeping reforms that would hold those in power accountable. The city was at a crossroads, its future uncertain as it teetered on the edge of transformative change. The raw emotion that permeated every public forum, every heated debate, and every tearful testimony underscored a deep-seated yearning for justice, a longing for a society where every individual was seen, heard, and valued. Amidst the growing clamor for accountability, Ali became a reluctant spokesperson for a collective grief and hope. In community centers filled with the echoes of countless untold stories, she listened to citizens recount their experiences of abuse and neglect with voices that trembled yet refused to be silenced. She heard the tales of a young man whose aspirations had been shattered by an unjust arrest, of an elderly woman whose lifelong dignity had been eroded by incessant harassment, and of countless others whose lives had been punctuated by moments of humiliation and despair. These stories, woven together by a common thread of systemic injustice, formed the backbone of a movement that was gathering strength with each passing day. The conversations that ensued were raw and unsparing, revealing the fractures within a society that prided itself on equality while perpetuating a cycle of exclusion. In these exchanges, the notion of justice was not an abstract ideal, but a lived reality, a tangible goal that demanded urgent action. Ali, with her unwavering empathy and determination, became the fulcrum around which these diverse voices converged. She organized town hall meetings in modest community halls and even in public parks where the weary and the hopeful alike could share their grievances and dreams for a better future. With every gathering, the unity among the attendees grew, as did the resolve to challenge a system that had long oppressed them. Yet, even as the movement gathered momentum, the struggle was marked by moments of profound sorrow and disillusionment. The scars of past injustices ran deep, and the emotional toll on those who had been wronged was evident in the tear-streaked faces of people who spoke of a life punctuated by relentless bias. In the dim light of early mornings and late evenings, as the city's pulse slowed to a melancholic rhythm, many found themselves grappling with a profound sense of loss. A loss of faith in institutions that had promised protection and justice, but had instead delivered only pain and disappointment. For Ali, the challenge was both external and internal. While she strove to galvanize a fractured community into a force capable of demanding reform, she also wrestled with the personal demons that had long haunted her. The memories of being overlooked, of feeling invisible amidst the glare of societal indifference, were not easily cast aside. Instead, they fueled a quiet anger, a simmering fury that was tempered only by the hope that one day the tides of injustice could be reversed. In her quiet moments of reflection, Allie recalled the unyielding strength of her father, Commander Marcus Washington, whose own battles against overwhelming odds had instilled in her a belief that the fight for dignity was never in vain. That legacy, though shrouded in mystery, became a beacon that lit her path through the murky shadows of systemic abuse. In the midst of this turmoil, technological innovation emerged as a powerful tool for those seeking to dismantle the old order. Ali, recognizing the potential of digital platforms to amplify the voices of the oppressed, collaborated with local tech enthusiasts to create a secure, anonymous space where citizens could share their experiences without fear of retribution. This digital archive quickly evolved into a repository of raw, unfiltered narratives, each story a testament to the resilience of those who had been battered by the harsh realities of their daily lives. The platform not only provided a much-needed outlet for expression, but also served as a critical piece of evidence for ongoing efforts to reform law enforcement practices. Every account, every detail, was a brushstroke in the larger portrait of a society in desperate need of change. As the movement continued to gain traction, the narrative surrounding police misconduct expanded to encompass a broader critique of societal inequities. The discussions that emerged were no longer confined to the actions of a few individuals, but were instead framed as the inevitable outcome of a deeply flawed system, one that had prioritized control over compassion and authority over accountability. The struggle was no longer merely about individual acts of injustice. It was about dismantling the structural barriers that had long perpetuated inequality. In this collective reckoning, every citizen was called upon to examine not only the external forces that oppressed them, but also the internalized beliefs that had allowed such forces to flourish. Throughout this turbulent period, Ali's role evolved from that of a bystander to that of a leader, a voice that spoke with both passion and clarity in the midst of chaos. Her presence at every community meeting, every protest, and every forum of discussion became a symbol of defiance against a system that had long stifled the dreams of so many. With a measured yet resolute tone, she articulated the shared anguish and hope of a community that had finally found its voice. Her words, imbued with both the pain of past wounds and the promise of a brighter future, resonated deeply with those who had long felt marginalized. They spoke of the need for accountability, the demand for transparency, and the call for reforms that would ensure that no one would ever again be made to feel invisible. Even as the struggle for justice advanced on public fronts, behind closed doors there were quiet battles being fought, battles that tested the limits of personal courage and resolve. Many of the individuals who had once been resigned to a life of silent suffering now found themselves at a crossroads, torn between the comfort of conformity and the perilous yet exhilarating prospect of resistance. In intimate conversations held in the dim glow of streetlights or over the hushed murmur of midnight phone calls, people shared their fears and aspirations. They spoke of dreams that had been deferred by a system that had taken so much from them, and of the desperate hope that one day their sacrifices would pave the way for a more just world. For Ali, these private moments of vulnerability were both painful and profoundly inspiring. They underscored the reality that the struggle for justice was not a solitary endeavor, but a collective journey, a tapestry woven from the threads of countless lives, each marked by its own story of pain, resilience, and unyielding hope. The voices of those around her became a chorus that spurred her onward, even as the weight of responsibility pressed heavily upon her shoulders. In the depths of that shared anguish, she discovered a wellspring of strength, a determination to see the fight through, no matter the cost. As the movement pressed forward, it began to garner attention from unexpected quarters. Progressive politicians, community leaders from diverse backgrounds, and even a few reform-minded members of law enforcement lent their support to the call for change. These alliances, fragile yet promising, hinted at the possibility that the entrenched structures of power could indeed be dismantled from within. Public debates and televised discussions became arenas where the issues of police accountability and systemic injustice were laid bare, forcing the city to confront uncomfortable truths that had long been buried under layers of complacency and denial. In the midst of this shifting landscape, Ali remained a steady presence, a beacon of unwavering resolve in a time of profound uncertainty. With each new story that emerged, each revelation of abuse and neglect, she was reminded of the urgency of their cause. The shadows of injustice that had once seemed insurmountable were slowly receding, replaced by the light of a collective awakening. Yet the road ahead was fraught with obstacles and setbacks, and the struggle for lasting change demanded not only passion, but also patience, strategy, and an unbreakable bond of solidarity among all those who had been hurt by the system. Through it all, Ali's vision remained clear, a future where every individual, regardless of their background or circumstance, would stand tall in the dignity of their existence. A future where the scars of past injustices would be healed by the transformative power of empathy, accountability, and unity. In the echoes of every shared story, in the quiet determination of those who refused to be silenced, she saw the blueprint for a new social order, one built not on the exploitation of the weak, but on the promise of equal opportunity and unyielding respect. As the days turned into weeks, the collective struggle against systemic injustice crystallized into a movement that was as much about reclaiming lost dignity as it was about reshaping a society that had long favored the privileged few. The narrative that had once been defined by shadows was now imbued with the light of possibility, a possibility that burned fiercely in the hearts of those who had finally found their voice. In the quiet determination of community meetings, in the fervent exchanges on digital platforms, and in the resolute declarations of truth that echoed through public squares, the call for justice grew louder and more insistent. In this ongoing battle, Ali and those who stood with her refused to let the darkness of injustice claim victory. They embrace the pain of the past as a catalyst for change, transforming personal grievances into a collective force that could no longer be ignored. The legacy of oppression that had once seemed insurmountable was now met with an unwavering resolve, a determination to break the chains that had held them captive for far too long. And in every step they took toward a more equitable future, the scars of yesterday became symbols of resilience, and every tear shed became a seed for the new dawn of justice. Thus, in the quiet interstices between public outcry and private sorrow, in the spaces where the weight of systemic injustice met the unyielding force of collective will, a new chapter was being written. It was a chapter defined not by the despair of a broken system, but by the promise of redemption and the transformative power of human solidarity. And though the shadows of injustice still lingered at the edges of their vision, the light of hope shone all the brighter, an unquenchable beacon that urged every soul to rise, to speak out, and to reclaim the dignity that had always been their birthright. In that relentless pursuit of justice, where every whispered secret, every shared pain, and every act of defiance became a step toward a more just society, Ali Washington emerged as the living embodiment of a movement that could no longer be contained. The struggle was far from over, yet with every passing day, the chorus of voices demanding accountability grew louder, and the dark, oppressive shadows of injustice were slowly but surely pushed back by the radiant light of collective hope and action. In the quiet aftermath of a relentless struggle for justice, Ali Washington found herself standing at the threshold of a revelation that would forever alter the course of her life. It began not with fanfare or spectacle, but with subtle clues hidden in the forgotten corners of her past. A past that had always whispered of secrets too weighty to be spoken aloud. Late one evening, as the city's neon glow softened into a tender haze and the tumult of daily protests ebbed into a reflective silence, Ali discovered a battered leather journal tucked away in a box of old mementos. The journal, its pages yellowed and edges frayed by time, belonged to a man whose name had been shrouded in mystery within her family, Commander Marcus Washington. The discovery of the journal sent ripples of conflicting emotion through Allie's heart. In the dim light of her small apartment, she carefully turned the fragile pages, each one a testament to a life dedicated to valor, sacrifice, and a pursuit of justice that transcended the ordinary. The words on those pages were not merely recollections of battles fought or medals earned. They were a living narrative of a man who had navigated the murky intersections of honor and duty. As Allie read, she felt an overwhelming connection to a heritage that had been denied to her for so long, a legacy of strength and unwavering resolve that now beckoned her to embrace her true identity. The journal recounted secret missions in distant lands, where Commander Washington had led covert operations with a blend of strategic genius and an uncompromising moral code. His experiences, narrated with raw candor and punctuated by moments of profound introspection, revealed a man who had not only been a master of military tactics but also a protector of the innocent. Through battles fought in silence and decisions made in the shadows of geopolitics, he had become a symbol of resistance against tyranny, a legacy that had been carefully obscured from public memory but preserved in the intimate recollections of those who had known him best. As Ali delved deeper into the pages, the narrative of Commander Washington's life unfolded with vivid clarity. He had faced not only the perils of warfare, but also the corrosive effects of power misused by those who were meant to uphold justice. His memoirs recounted moments of agonizing choice, risking his own safety to shield vulnerable communities, defying orders that threatened to compromise his ethics, and standing alone against a tide of corruption that sought to suppress the truth. Each entry was imbued with a sense of personal sacrifice, a testament to the fact that true leadership often demanded solitude and a burden of secrets too heavy for the faint of heart. For Ali, the realization of her father's storied past was a double-edged sword. On one side, it filled her with a profound sense of pride, a pride born of knowing that within her veins ran the blood of a man who had embodied courage in its purest form. On the other, it cast a long shadow of expectation. Could she possibly live up to a legacy that had been crafted in the crucible of extraordinary sacrifice and strategic brilliance? These questions echoed through her thoughts as she read about clandestine operations executed under the cover of darkness, and the moments when Commander Washington had risked everything to ensure that justice prevailed, even if it meant standing alone against insurmountable odds. The journal was more than a chronicle of military exploits. It was a guidebook for moral fortitude. It spoke of principles that had been the cornerstone of her father's life: integrity, compassion, and an unyielding commitment to the dignity of every human being. The entries were interspersed with personal reflections, moments when the commander had questioned the true cost of victory and the sacrifices demanded by a life of service. These passages resonated deeply with Ali, igniting within her a desire to forge a path that was both true to her own spirit and inspired by the timeless lessons of her father's journey. Emboldened by this newfound connection to her heritage, Ali began to piece together the fragments of her own identity. She sought out those who had once served alongside her father, reaching out to retired colleagues and old friends who could offer glimpses of the man behind the legendary title. In quiet, hushed conversations held in the back rooms of community centers and over cups of strong coffee in dimly lit diners, she listened to their recollections of Commander Washington. Their voices, often laced with reverence and an undercurrent of sorrow for lost times, painted a portrait of a leader who had been as human as he was formidable. They spoke of his laughter amid hardship, his unwavering sense of justice, and the silent strength that had inspired loyalty even in the most dangerous of circumstances. Each conversation further deepened Ali's understanding of the legacy she had inherited. It was not merely a mantle of military prowess or a lineage of clandestine victories, it was a living philosophy, a commitment to stand against injustice at any cost. The more she learned, the more Ali recognized that her father's battles had not been fought on distant battlefields alone, but within the very structures of power that now sought to silence the marginalized. His life, a continuous struggle against systems of oppression, mirrored the challenges she herself faced in the modern world. In this realization, Ali found both solace and a renewed determination. Her father's legacy was not a relic of a bygone era, but a vibrant, potent force that could be harnessed to confront the injustices of today. In the weeks that followed, as Ali immersed herself in the rich tapestry of her father's past, she began to forge alliances that transcended the boundaries of her previous activism. Her journey into the hidden legacy opened doors to unexpected collaborations with individuals who had once been part of the same clandestine world. Former military associates, whose lives had been irrevocably changed by their service under Commander Washington, stepped forward to offer their insights and support. They shared with Ali not only strategic wisdom, but also the quiet understanding that true change required a blend of resolve and compassion. In their eyes, she saw reflections of her father's unyielding spirit, a reminder that the fight for justice was as much about moral courage as it was about tactical brilliance. Simultaneously, Allie began to explore the broader implications of this legacy on her personal mission. With the weight of her father's experiences now resonating within her, she re-examined her own approach to activism. The fight against systemic injustice, she realized, required more than passionate protests and public declarations. It demanded a nuanced understanding of power, ethics, and the intricate ways in which personal histories could inform social change. Inspired by her father's example, she started to integrate strategic planning into her efforts, envisioning long-term reforms that would dismantle entrenched structures of corruption. It was a transformation that went beyond mere rhetoric. It was a fundamental shift in how she perceived her role in the struggle for dignity and equality. This internal metamorphosis was not without its challenges. Ali often found herself caught between the gravity of her newfound heritage and the immediate demands of her community's struggles. There were moments of profound introspection when the enormity of her father's legacy threatened to overshadow her own identity. In these times, she would retreat to the quiet solitude of her favorite spot along the East River, where the gentle murmur of the water provided a soothing counterpoint to the tumult of her thoughts. There, amid the serene flow of the river and the distant hum of the city, she reconciled the dual aspects of her existence, the fierce activist determined to uproot injustice and the inheritor of a legacy that demanded both strength and humility. As the layers of history unfolded, Ali realized that the legacy of Commander Washington was not confined to the pages of a journal or the recollections of a bygone era. It was a living, breathing force that permeated every facet of her struggle. His principles, etched in the quiet determination of every act of defiance, became the guiding light that illuminated her path forward. The revelations from the journal kindled in her an unshakable resolve to honor his memory by carrying his fight into the present, to transform personal sacrifice into collective empowerment. In time, Allie's journey of self-discovery catalyzed a broader movement within her community. The story of her hidden heritage, once a private and guarded secret, emerged as a powerful symbol of resistance, a testament to the enduring strength that lies within those who dare to challenge the status quo. As she shared the insights gleaned from her father's memoirs in intimate gatherings and community forums, a new narrative took shape. It was a narrative that wove together the threads of past heroism with the contemporary struggle for justice, creating a tapestry of hope that inspired countless others to believe in the possibility of change. The impact of this legacy was felt not only in the strategies of protest or the reformation of policies, but also in the hearts of those who had long been marginalized. Ali's journey became a rallying cry for individuals who had been trapped by a cycle of systemic neglect, a reminder that even the most unassuming lives could harbor a power capable of reshaping history. In every whispered conversation, every shared memory, and every tear shed in remembrance of battles fought in silence, the hidden legacy of Commander Marcus Washington lived on, infusing the present with a promise of a more just and compassionate future. Thus, as Ali Washington embraced the full weight of her inheritance, she emerged not only as a leader of a movement, but as a living embodiment of a legacy that transcended time. The pages of the journal had revealed the story of a man whose life was a testament to courage and sacrifice, but in doing so, they had also illuminated the path for his daughter, a path defined by the relentless pursuit of justice, tempered by the wisdom of past struggles, and driven by an unyielding belief that every soul deserved to be seen and heard. In that convergence of history and destiny, Ali found the strength to move forward, her heart emboldened by the timeless echo of a legacy that was now unequivocally her own. In a city that had long teetered on the edge of quiet resignation, a moment of reckoning arrived like a tidal wave, transforming whispers of discontent into a resounding declaration for change. On a crisp morning beneath a sky painted with the soft hues of dawn, Aaliyah Ali Washington stepped forward to embody the courage that had been nurtured by years of struggle. No longer content to be an anonymous face in a sea of oppression, she emerged into the light as a symbol of defiance, a leader ready to confront the entrenched injustices head on. Gathered in a grand public space, chosen for its historical weight and symbolic promise of renewal, the people of the city came together as one unified force. The venue, an open square flanked by time-worn stone buildings and bathed in the gentle glow of early sunlight, became a living testament to the power of the human spirit. Here, individuals from every walk of life assembled, not merely as spectators, but as active participants in the unfolding narrative of resistance. Their eyes, filled with both hope and quiet determination, reflected the collective yearning for a future unburdened by the failures of the past. Ali's presence on the makeshift stage was electrifying. Clad in her signature navy blue uniform, now transformed into a badge of honor rather than an emblem of submission, she stood with a calm assurance that belied the turbulent history behind her. In her hand, she held a collection of meticulously gathered evidence, photographs, video clips, documented testimonies, each piece a brick in the foundation of a case against the systemic abuses that had long plagued the community. As she surveyed the sea of faces before her, she could see in their eyes the reflection of every injustice endured, every voice silenced by an indifferent system. It was in that charged atmosphere that she began to speak, her voice rising with clarity and passion. Every word Ali uttered was imbued with the weight of personal loss and the fervor of collective hope. She spoke of accountability, not as a distant ideal, but as a tangible goal that could reshape the very fabric of society. Her message was clear. The era of unchecked power and impunity was over. In a tone both firm and compassionate, she recounted the experiences of those who had suffered, of families torn apart by arbitrary detentions, of dreams shattered by relentless prejudice, and of the silent agony that had festered in the hearts of the oppressed. Yet she did not dwell solely on the darkness of these memories. Instead, she painted a vision of a future reborn through unity, transparency, and the unwavering pursuit of justice. As Ali's words echoed through the square, the air grew thick with the palpable energy of transformation. The crowd responded with an outpouring of support, a spontaneous chorus of cheers and affirmations that resonated far beyond the confines of that public forum. In that moment, every individual present was not just a witness to change, but a vital thread woven into the fabric of a nascent movement. The unity was profound, transcending age, background, and personal history, all bound by a shared commitment to dismantle the oppressive structures that had long dictated the terms of their lives. The confrontation on that day was not limited to the impassioned speeches and the collective roar of the crowd. It extended into the realm of tangible action, as Ali and her allies presented a series of concrete demands. They called for an independent inquiry into the practices of local law enforcement, for the implementation of community-led oversight committees, and for sweeping reforms that would ensure transparency and accountability at every level of governance. Every demand was articulated with precision, reflecting not only the urgency of the present, but also a strategic vision for the future. In a particularly striking moment, a veteran officer, once a silent enforcer of a flawed system, stepped forward to lend his voice to the call for reform. His admission, delivered in a tone heavy with remorse and introspection, was a turning point that underscored the multifaceted nature of the struggle. He spoke of the internal conflicts that had haunted him for years, of the dissonance between the values he once cherished and the reality of the system he had been compelled to uphold. His words, raw and unguarded, added a powerful dimension to the dialogue, a recognition that even those within the corridors of power could be moved to act with conscience and integrity. Throughout the proceedings, the symbolism of the event was unmistakable. Ali's resolute stance and unwavering determination were bolstered by the legacy of her father, Commander Marcus Washington, whose long-hidden history of courage and sacrifice had silently paved the way for this moment of reckoning. The echoes of his valor reverberated in every word she spoke, serving as both an inspiration and a reminder that the fight for justice was as old as the struggle itself. His legacy, once confined to faded journal entries and guarded family memories, now shone brightly in the collective consciousness of a community determined to reclaim its dignity. As the day wore on, the stand for justice evolved into a multifaceted campaign. Outside the formal setting of the public forum, spontaneous acts of solidarity unfolded across the city. Murals depicting powerful symbols of resistance began to appear on weathered walls. Community members gathered in impromptu vigils, sharing their personal testimonies of injustice and renewal, and digital platforms buzzed with the resounding message that the time for complacency had passed. Each act, no matter how small, contributed to the growing momentum that was reshaping public discourse and challenging the status quo. In the midst of this transformative energy, Ali remained the steady center of a whirlwind of hope and determination. She moved among the crowd, listening to the stories of those who had long been ignored, offering words of encouragement and forging connections that transcended the boundaries of individual pain. With each handshake and each shared tear, she reaffirmed the belief that true justice was a collective effort, a mosaic of countless voices united by a common purpose. The stand for justice, as witnessed that day, was not merely a protest against past wrongs. It was an active reclamation of a future defined by accountability, respect, and unwavering human dignity. It was a moment when the voices of the marginalized were elevated, when the quiet strength of a community long relegated to the shadows burst forth into the light, demanding to be seen and heard. In that historic gathering, every person present contributed to a narrative that transcended individual grievances, weaving together a tapestry of hope that would guide the city toward a more just and equitable tomorrow. As the sun began to set over the determined assembly, casting long, reflective shadows on the open square, the energy of the day lingered like a promise, an assurance that this stand for justice was not an isolated event but the beginning of a sustained revolution. The path ahead would be fraught with challenges, setbacks, and moments of heart-wrenching uncertainty. But the spark ignited on that fateful day would continue to burn, fueling the relentless pursuit of a society where every life was honored, every voice was amplified, and justice was not a privilege but a birthright. In that quiet, resolute twilight, Ali Washington and the people of the city embraced the profound truth that the struggle for justice was both a personal and a collective journey, one that demanded unwavering courage, strategic resolve, and an unbreakable bond of solidarity. Their stand for justice had been etched into the very soul of the city, a testament to the transformative power of a single voice rising against the tide of oppression, and a herald of the dawn of a new era defined by accountability, compassion, and an enduring commitment to the common good. As dawn broke over the city, a quiet revolution was underway. A revolution that promised not just reform, but a complete rebirth of community spirit and self-determination. In the months following a tumultuous period of struggle, Aaliyah Ali Washington emerged as a beacon of hope, a living testament to the transformative power of unity and resilience. The city, once mired in the weight of systemic neglect and oppression, now found itself at the threshold of a new era, an era defined by collective empowerment and the unwavering belief that every individual held the right to dignity and opportunity. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation as public spaces, once somber reminders of past injustices, were reimagined as vibrant centers of renewal. Across neighborhoods, community centers blossomed into hubs of activity and learning. In renovated historic buildings near Central Park, citizens gathered to attend workshops, share ideas, and forge paths to self-improvement. Here, in a setting that celebrated both tradition and progress, initiatives were launched to provide legal aid, job training, and educational programs. The focus was not solely on redressing grievances, it was on equipping people with the tools they needed to build a future marked by fairness and opportunity. Ali's vision was clear. Empowerment must begin at the grassroots level, where the potential of every person is recognized and nurtured. With tireless energy, she coordinated efforts to transform disused public spaces into creative sanctuaries where art, music, and dialogue could flourish. Murals depicting the triumphs of everyday heroes emerged on city walls, each stroke of color a declaration of pride and possibility. These public works of art became symbols of the community's rebirth, a visual reminder that every scar, every tear, had contributed to a collective strength that could not be undone. Central to this new dawn was the Empowerment Hub, a multifaceted center that served as both a sanctuary and a launchpad for personal and communal growth. Inside its walls, individuals from all walks of life found support and inspiration. Volunteers, many of whom had once been marginalized by the very systems they now sought to reform, took on leadership roles, mentoring younger generations and sharing stories of hardship transformed into triumph. The hub became a living archive of resilience, where digital platforms captured stories of recovery and renewal, and where the language of empowerment replaced that of despair. Ali herself dedicated countless hours to ensuring that the hub's services reached the most vulnerable segments of the community. She met with local business leaders, civic officials, and educators to create partnerships that would sustain and expand these initiatives. Under her guidance, new educational programs were developed to teach digital literacy and vocational skills, preparing community members for opportunities in a rapidly changing economy. Her efforts were not merely reactive, they were visionary, designed to break the cycle of poverty and disenfranchisement that had plagued the city for so long. Beyond tangible services, the dawn of ISO empowerment brought with it a profound shift in the collective mindset. No longer were citizens resigned to a fate defined by neglect and systemic bias. Instead, a culture of self-advocacy and mutual support began to take root. Town hall meetings and community forums evolved into dynamic spaces of debate and collaboration, where ideas were exchanged freely and every voice was considered essential. These gatherings were punctuated by moments of raw emotion, a shared recognition of past injustices, and a mutual commitment to rewriting the future. In these spaces, empowerment was more than a goal. It was a lived experience cultivated through trust, respect, and a relentless pursuit of collective progress. This transformation was evident not only in community initiatives, but also in the broader public discourse. Local media outlets, once critical of activist movements, began to highlight stories of personal transformation and community-led change. The narrative shifted from one of victimhood to one of active participation and hope. Editorials spoke of a city reawakening to its potential, of institutions beginning to mirror the values of transparency and accountability that citizens demanded. Every new policy, every reform initiative was celebrated as a victory, not just for a single individual or group, but for the entire community. Allie's leadership was central to this narrative of change. Her journey from a woman who once navigated the shadows of injustice to one who now stood as a symbol of empowerment was chronicled widely. Yet, what resonated most deeply with those who followed her story was not just the dramatic transformation of institutions, but the quiet, steadfast courage with which she led every day. Her humility and commitment to service served as a reminder that true empowerment was born from empathy and a willingness to listen, to understand, and to act on behalf of others. Through her example, countless others found the strength to speak out, to challenge the status quo, and to embrace their own power to effect change. In this new dawn, the legacy of past struggles was not forgotten but integrated into a forward-looking vision. The pain and sacrifice of those who had come before provided a solid foundation upon which to build a more equitable future. Every obstacle overcome, every injustice challenged, was reinterpreted as a stepping stone toward a brighter tomorrow. In the light of this renewed hope, the scars of the past transformed into symbols of endurance, a visual narrative that spoke of a community rising from its wounds to reclaim its dignity. As the movement matured, the ripple effects extended far beyond the confines of individual neighborhoods. Cross-city collaborations emerged, uniting diverse communities under the common banner of empowerment. Workshops on leadership, cultural heritage, and advocacy became regular events, fostering a spirit of inclusivity and shared purpose. The empowerment movement had become a tapestry woven from many threads, each one a story of resilience, of dreams rekindled, of lives transformed by the simple yet profound act of believing in one's own worth. In the final analysis, the new dawn of empowerment was not simply about changing policies or institutions. It was about changing hearts and minds. It was about replacing the legacy of exclusion with one of inclusion, replacing despair with hope, and replacing division with unity. For Allie Washington and her community, every day became an opportunity to write a new chapter in their collective story, a story defined by possibility, by mutual support, and by the unyielding belief that when every individual is empowered, the entire society can rise to unprecedented heights. Thus, as the city embraced this era of transformation, the future shimmered with promise, a future where every citizen could step forward with confidence, where every voice, no matter how long suppressed, could contribute to the symphony of change. In that radiant light, the dawn of empowerment was not merely an endpoint, but a continuous journey. A journey that, with every new beginning, reaffirmed the timeless truth that true power lies within the collective heart of a united community. Ali Washington's journey is a stirring testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of courage in the face of systemic injustice. Her story begins in the unnoticed shadows of a bustling city, where daily life was marked by a quiet struggle against a society that too often dismissed the marginalized. From the moment she stepped onto the cracked sidewalks of New York City, clad in her modest navy blue uniform, Allie carried with her the weight of silent indignities, years of being overlooked, of enduring a world that failed to see the inherent worth in every individual. Yet within this seemingly ordinary existence lay an extraordinary spark, a promise of change that would one day ignite into a movement powerful enough to challenge the status quo. Her first act of defiance came unexpectedly on a crisp autumn morning, when the harsh glare of authority converged on a vulnerable young woman in the midst of an unjust confrontation. Unable to remain a passive witness, Allie's bold intervention transformed a single moment of injustice into a symbol of hope. This act, though small in the eyes of some, resonated deeply with a community long subjugated by systemic bias and indifference. It was the catalyst that set off a chain of events, awakening not only the citizens of the city, but also stirring something long dormant within her, a connection to a legacy shrouded in mystery and valor. As whispers of her courageous acts spread, the hidden chapters of Ali's past began to unravel. In the quiet solitude of her modest apartment, she uncovered a battered leather journal that belonged to her father, Commander Marcus Washington, a man whose life was a tapestry of secret missions, unwavering principles, and sacrifices made in the name of justice. Through the fragile pages, Ali discovered a lineage steeped in bravery and moral fortitude, a legacy that had long been obscured by time and silence. Her father's story was not merely one of military triumphs, but a narrative that spoke of standing firm against corruption, of protecting the innocent even when it meant standing alone against formidable odds. This revelation became the turning point of her journey, infusing her with a renewed sense of purpose and an unbreakable resolve to carry forward a mission that transcended her own existence. Armed with the weight of her inherited legacy and the support of a community that had grown tired of living in the shadows of injustice, Ali embraced the mantle of leadership. She transformed her personal pain and experiences into a clarion call for systemic change. Organizing town hall meetings, rallying the voices of those who had suffered in silence, and leveraging the power of digital platforms, Ali orchestrated a stand for justice that brought together disparate voices into a unified movement. In a historic public forum held in a space steeped in the heritage of the city, she boldly presented irrefutable evidence of abuse and corruption, each document, each photograph, each testimony serving as a brick in the foundation of a new social order. The movement was not merely a protest, it was a strategic, collective demand for accountability, transparency, and a reimagining of how society valued every human life. The public stand for justice became a transformative moment, a turning point that reshaped the narrative of power. It was on that day that even those within the ranks of the authority began to question the integrity of the system they served. In the charged atmosphere of the public square, voices that had long been suppressed found their strength, and even the remorseful confessions of disenfranchised officers lent credence to the call for meaningful reform. The echoes of that day reverberated far beyond the immediate confrontation. They signaled the beginning of a broader transformation, one that would see the dismantling of long entrenched structures of oppression and the birth of a community united in purpose. As the battle against systemic injustice continued, the seeds of a new era began to sprout. Ali's vision of empowerment took root in every corner of the city. With unwavering dedication, she championed the creation of community centers and the launch of initiatives designed to uplift those who had long been denied their rightful place in society. The Empowerment Hub emerged as a beacon of renewal, a sanctuary where legal aid, educational programs, and vocational training were provided to the most vulnerable. Public spaces that once echoed with the despair of neglect were reborn as vibrant centers of creativity and dialogue, where murals and art installations became visual declarations of hope and resilience. Through these endeavors, Ali not only addressed immediate needs, but also built the scaffolding for long-term, sustainable change. Her leadership illuminated the path forward, proving that even the deepest scars of injustice could be healed when communities united in pursuit of a common goal. Today, as the city basks in the light of a new dawn, the legacy of Ali Washington serves as a powerful reminder that true empowerment begins from within. Her journey teaches us that the fight for justice is not defined by the magnitude of our circumstances, but by the courage with which we choose to rise above them. In every act of defiance, in every heartfelt conversation, in every community meeting where voices join in solidarity, there lies the potential to transform our collective reality. Her story is a call to action, a reminder that each of us holds the power to shape a future where dignity, respect, and opportunity are not privileges reserved for a few, but the birthright of every individual. The lessons we draw from Ali's life are both timeless and urgently relevant to our own lives. In a world where injustice can seem overwhelming and systemic barriers appear insurmountable, her journey reminds us that even the smallest act of resistance can spark a revolution. We learn that to stand up for what is right, to listen to the quiet truths of our past, and to honor the legacy of those who fought before us is to empower not only ourselves, but also the generations to come. Her story invites us to examine our own lives, to find the courage to challenge injustice in whatever form it appears, and to use our voices as instruments of change. It calls upon us to build communities of support, to celebrate diversity, and to transform adversity into opportunity. In embracing these lessons, we pave the way for a future defined by compassion, equity, and the relentless pursuit of justice. If you have found inspiration in Ali Washington's journey, if you believe in the power of one voice to ignite change and transform lives, then I invite you to join this movement for hope and empowerment. Subscribe to our channel to support the ongoing exploration of stories that remind us of our shared strength and the endless possibilities that arise when we come together. Your support not only fuels our commitment to sharing these powerful narratives, but also strengthens the collective voice that challenges injustice wherever it may reside. Together, let us build a future where every story of resilience inspires new beginnings, and every act of courage lights the way to a better tomorrow.